Now, ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned at the beginning, it is important for us not only to talk about young workers, but also with young people. Therefore, I'm really happy to give the stage to our second keynote speaker, Ms. Samar Samir Mezghanni. She's a Tunisian writer, an activist, and a PhD candidate at the University of Cambridge. She studied communication and culture at the University of Birmingham in the UK, and psychology at the University of Tunis Al Manar. Samar is a renowned author. She started very, very early. She's the recipient of several awards and honors, such as the youngest and also the most prolific writer by the Guinness Book of World Records. In 2013, she was also selected as one of the 100 most powerful Arab women. She's also recently been selected as one of the 17 United Nations Young Leaders for the Sustainable Development Goals. Samar, please come up and join me on stage.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak today at the World Congress on Safety and Health at Work. This is my first time attending this event. And I probably speak for many of us here when I say that for the last 2 days, I've been feeling like a child, walking around and inside these huge, big buildings in Marina Bay, it stands in Singapore. And I don't know about you, but I did get lost quite a lot of times, in spite of signs and directions and maps, and also feeling wonder and amazement about how much there is to learn from other delegates and panels. It's like that feeling of wonder and curiosity that we have when we are children. To me, childhood has always been about stories. I wrote my first story when I was 7 years old and published my first book at the age of 10. And writing the story and publishing it was actually not the hardest part. The hardest part was when I was talking to adults who heard about my experience. They would look at me in the face and ask, in complete denial, how could you, a child, write children's stories? To me, that was a very confusing question. So I would look at them at the face and think in my little head, how could you, an adult, ask such a silly question? Don't you see the absurdity and how ironic it is to ask such a question? They really thought that you needed to become an adult to write for children. They could not understand that a child can write for another child. But as a matter of fact, one of the reasons that pushed me to write stories for children as a child was my dissatisfaction with the stories that adults wrote to us. So I continued writing and met with other children who write stories, and together we got organized. We started going around the country, Tunisia, making workshops and encouraging other children to read and to write. And eventually we even published a series of books that are for children by children. And when some of us received literature prizes, national literature prizes, that only adults used to have in the past, adults started to notice. So some of them came to us, approached us, worked with us, and became our mentors, our colleagues, and wrote new, different stories with us. But as I grew older, I realized that the ignorance and fear of a generation writing its own story, its own destiny, is very common, especially for youth. The ignorance and fear of a generation writing its own story and its own destiny is very common, especially for youth. Young people, like many other groups, such as women, are expected to be influenced by policies, not influencing them. They're expected to listen, not to be listened to. They're expected to work for adults, not to work with them. But today, this is changing, slowly but steadily. Young people are leading in innovative businesses, in innovative technological businesses. They're leading social entrepreneurship in the business, but they're also changing and shaking regimes in the streets. And they're offering new solutions to pressing global issues that are affecting our societies. Their efforts and the need to work with them is being recognized at the highest level. In 2013, the United Nations appointed the first youth envoy to the Secretary General, promoting youth leadership and empowerment. Last year, as you heard earlier, the UN also appointed 17 young leaders as Young Leaders for the Sustainable Development Goals, UN Young Leaders for the Sustainable Development Goals. And today, right here, right now, for the first time of the history of this Congress, a dialogue between adults and youth is being put at the center of this Congress agenda, at least for the next 2 hours. It struck me that young people are the most affected by risks and injuries at work. We are a generation that has a 40% more chances of risks and injuries at the workplace. Do we need a higher statistical threshold to start caring and paying more attention? Are we underestimating young people so we're not paying attention to them, or are we overestimating them, thinking that they are physically strong so we shouldn't have concerns for them? Today, right here, the dialogue between us, experts on occupational safety and health, and those who are the most concerned by it, could not be more timely. You have a vested interest in talking about us with us, not just in the next 2 hours, but every hour of the day. In this room, there is 125 young champions who came from all over the world to discuss and come up with ideas to make working conditions for young people safer. We are here to improve laws, policies, and systems that are affecting us. In a few minutes, you will hear from them. And they will present their ideas on you on how we can work together to make a working environment safer for everyone. So we are here, as in many other sectors, trying to contribute to the decision-making processes that affect us, trying to write new stories. And you have a golden opportunity to be part of that story. Occupational safety and health has always been defined and perceived as a technical field where only experts are needed. But experts are not the ones that are affected by it. They're not the ones who are the most at risk at work environment. It's the young people who are. Collaborating with young people does not undermine your technical expertise. It validates it, it legitimizes it, and it gives it more meaning beyond its technicality. Because before and beyond being experts, you are people who care about the safety and health of others. Because before and beyond your technical language and jargon that you've been speaking for the last 2 days, you speak your mind, your worries and your concerns for co-workers and colleagues. Because before and beyond this room, leaders across different sectors have been witnessing the value of working with young people. So before we leave this room, to take this conversation to our family dinner tables and coffee breaks, this conversation has to start now. Talk to us. Listen to us. Approach us. Meet us. Because our experience matters. Because what you're talking about, we are living it. When listening to the presentations later on, I invite you to not only take note of what young champions are suggesting, but also to take actions on a goal we all share, a safer environment, work environment for everyone. So are you ready to work with young people to make them less vulnerable at work? Okay, I heard yes, and I saw some of these green cards, but this is actually not a rhetorical question. This is a real question. I need an answer for it, and I need it loud, so don't be shy. Let me hear you say it. Are you ready to work with young people now to make them less vulnerable at work? Yes. Awesome, great. This is a verbal commitment, everyone. Please take note. And let us take actions to follow up on this commitment and validate it. Let us write new stories for those who are at risk at work with them. Thank you very much.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you so much, Samara. I don't know how you follow that speech, but I saw a lot of heads nodding in the audience, and this was absolutely wonderful way to get our conversation started. I wondered if I could, maybe if you'd allow me, ask you just a few questions that sort of came up,
sure,
for me at least, from your talk. I mean, you talked about really not being taken seriously as a young writer. Why do you think that is, or why do you think that happened? Yes, let's go out there.
Yes, I think when we start getting more power, and power here can take different meanings. It can mean more knowledge, more money, more prestige, which usually all come with age. When we become more powerful, we forget that those who are affected by our power are the most important. And in my case as a child, adults forgot that children are the most important, and that they can actually become producers of knowledge and of stories and of art, not just consumers of it. So of course, when they see you as that young, they don't take you seriously. And this is why I needed to work into proving myself, but also into like proving them wrong when they asked me, how could you as a child write for children?
Right, right. I mean, you also talked about being underestimated, I think, which I think is extremely important that you mentioned that, because now you're invited to, very big international conferences to give keynote speeches. I mean, how did that transition happen?
So it took 20 years to happen, but I think really what it took from me is to write even more stories. The first book was underestimated, but by book 14, or the 11th book, people started to be convinced. And when I go to events like these and I speak, and I try to be authentic and representative of what my generation believes, and proves to adults that we can help them help us, then they start to estimate them the right way, that we are equal to them. And I think this is why it's very important that we have these youth champions here today, because they're not coming here empty-handed. They have projects that they've been working on, prototypes that they've been conceptualizing,
right,
to prove that they can also help.
And then one final question, if I may. I mean, what do you think OSH experts in the room can gain from working and talking to the young workers? Because you talked about it at the end of your talk, and
Yes.
you got the commitment. What do you think they can learn?
So, of course, I mentioned this briefly in the speech. There is validation and meaning to your work when you do it with young people. It gives legitimacy to what you're doing, but also it gives efficiency to it. And I'll just give you a little anecdotal story about that. I got my first job when I was 14 years old. I was a TV presenter for children. And the environment was not safe in many ways, because as a child there, I was surrounded by all these old men who were obviously underestimating me, but also made me feel insecure and unsafe. And every time I'm standing in front of the camera to start recording the TV episode, the directors and the cameraman would be worried that I'm looking nervous in front of the camera. But the reason why I was getting nervous is because of them. So they kept telling me that I needed to be more at ease, but I kept asking them that they needed to make me at ease so I can do my job better. And what I'm saying here is that when young people feel safer in their work environment, their work will become more efficient and more productive.
Right.
So there is a vested interest for you experts, but also for employers and for everyone who is concerned about this topic, to talk to young people and make their working conditions better and safer.
Thank you very, very much. So can we give Samara another round of applause,
Thank you.
please?